Don't leave the TV on. Turn off the lights in either the living room or your room. Got it, got it. I'll save energy properly. I left the house to go shopping far away. Whether we are leaving or at home, our family works together to save energy by making sure we don't forget to turn off the lights or adjust the air conditioner settings. Today, as usual, I went out with the family reminding each other to be careful. However, when I came back a few hours later, our precious home had completely changed. If you love saving so much, let me save energy for you. The sinister sound was her laugh. Sneaking into our home, she turned off the circuit breaker, causing a major incident. The reason she did such a thing was, my name is Luna. I'm 29 years old and married to Ollie, who is my age. After our marriage, we moved in with his family. His mother had already passed away, and his father, who had a chronic respiratory condition, was living alone. My husband, worried about his father's health, persuaded me to move in while I continued working. His unmarried sister was also living there, but I couldn't get along with her. His father, who was gentle and kind like my husband, was the opposite of his sister, who had a volatile temperament. I, being straightforward, often clashed with her, and as her elder, barely managed to keep her in check. If it weren't for her, our lives would be peaceful. However, within 6 months, his father's condition worsened. He needed an oxygen inhalation device to stay at home. Both my sister-in-law and I worked, so we couldn't help his father during the day if anything happened. While it was necessary to find a safe environment like a care facility, his father refused to leave the house filled with memories of his late wife. After discussing with my husband, we concluded that forcing him out of his home would be detrimental to his health. So we decided to hire a helper, but this led to another problem. My sister-in-law didn't like having strangers in the house and started harassing the helpers. She would secretly insult and annoy them, claiming, if they can't provide proper care, we can't trust them with father, and kept complaining to the agency. Many helpers quit, and when we figured out the cause, it was too late. The agency told us, we can't send anyone new, essentially giving up on us. What should we do? We've been rejected by this company too.
We're probably blacklisted. Damn, it's because of her.
Known as a troublemaking household, we couldn't rely on helpers anymore. We sighed and had to think of other solutions. My sister-in-law, naturally selfish and isolated from the family, was frequently admonished by my husband, which led to fierce sibling arguments. He eventually told her, move out and be independent. But being scolded only made her more hostile towards me, the less resistant target. You're the one who got married into this family, so you should take care of him. My brother can't quit his job, but you can. Hearing this, my husband would argue again. This didn't allow for a peaceful life for his father either. Though it was annoying to agree with her, there was no other choice. His father, concerned about my unfamiliarity with the environment, put on a brave face to help me settle in. Feeling indebted to him, I said, I'll quit my job and take care of your father. I'll also start learning about caregiving. He's my family too. When I decided to resign for caregiving, both my husband and his father tearfully thanked me. Learning about caregiving from scratch was difficult, but his father always encouraged me kindly. The only constant was my sister-in-law, who remained at home without helping with housework or caregiving. On her days off, she would disappear, likely going out to have fun. Though I spent more time at home, with caregiving and studying, it was hard to keep up with everything. Despite dividing chores with my husband, there were gaps, and she would quickly criticize. You decided to do both caregiving and housework, right? You like doing everything yourself, don't you? Whenever I retorted, she would respond with sarcastic remarks. She continued to harass me but would get caught and scolded by my husband. Every time, she would say, "Father is too kind to say anything. I'm saying it on his behalf." Naturally, there was no improvement, and dealing with her constant interruptions was increasingly stressful. I felt immense respect for the helpers who managed to care for his father while enduring her behavior. Both his father and my husband were fed up with her persistent attitude. One day, while secretly discussing with my husband how to encourage her independence, she announced, "I've got a fiancé, so I'm moving out. Bye, Father. I'll visit sometimes." She left suddenly, and while we were taken aback, the house became much more peaceful without her chaotic presence. Though there were discussions about moving his father to a care facility due to his age and condition, I had become more adept at caregiving, so we decided to continue home care. Though she lived with her fiancé, she frequently returned home. "What's for dinner? It'll just go to waste, so pack it for me. I'll take it home." It seemed she was relying on leftovers to avoid cooking for her fiancé. Her selfishness remained, treating me like a housekeeper.
Don't order Luna around without helping, Anna.
Yes, yes. Sorry, Luna. Satisfied? Now hurry and make dinner. She ignored his mild reprimand, brushing it off. Honestly, cooking the same amount as before wasn't the problem. The real issue was the expenses. Despite moving out, she contributed nothing financially while taking advantage of everything, straining our budget. Moreover, she had no sense of saving energy or money. "Anna, please turn off the lights in unused rooms. Are you going to the bath or not?" She lay on the sofa, playing games on her phone, with the TV on and all the lights in the bathroom and changing area turned on but with no intention of moving. Trying to get her to choose between the game and the bath, she glared at me. "Fine. I was just about to go, so don't interrupt me. Always nagging about saving energy like an idiot. It's not even significant savings. You're so stingy, old lady."
Anna. How dare you speak like that?
"I meant big sister. Don't get mad over a small word." Her retort followed his scolding as she finally turned off the TV and went to the changing area. Though she argued, she listened to our requests. Despite years of work and having a fiancé, her maturity remained that of a rebellious teenager. I no longer expected her to act her age. Our relationship hadn't improved even after she moved out, maintaining tension. I thought energy saving could connect our family, but that too seemed challenging. One day, I was driving to a large shopping mall in the suburbs, quite far from home. I had gone out shopping at my father-in-law's request. It's not that he can't go out himself, but he needs to carry a portable oxygen tank whenever he does. Though the tank has a trolley, it's still heavy and cumbersome for my elderly father-in-law. Moreover, the nasal cannula makes it evident that he needs oxygen therapy, prompting sympathetic remarks from acquaintances he meets. Tired of being pitted, my father-in-law seldom goes out and often stays at home. Although he had made such requests many times before, my husband usually handled them when he was home. I was careful not to leave my father-in-law alone, but this time, I had no choice but to go out. Though I was worried, I knew he wasn't helpless. He only needed the oxygen tank for breathing, but he was still capable of doing many things on his own. I urged him to use the air conditioning adequately despite our efforts to save electricity, and then I set off for the shopping trip. After completing my shopping without any issues, I returned to our parking lot a few hours later, carrying the purchased items. Although I had left before noon, it was already late afternoon by the time I got back. Before entering the house, I picked up my phone, thinking my husband might have sent a message about dinner. But as soon as I saw the screen, I was shocked. What? There were countless missed calls. The calls were from my husband, my father-in-law, and the general hospital my father-in-law frequented. Cold sweat broke out on my back. I had switched my phone to silent mode while driving, a habit I had followed today as well. I hadn't realized the calls had come in. Anxiety welled up inside me. I first tried calling my husband back, but despite the repeated ringing, he didn't answer. Growing increasingly anxious, I next called my father-in-law's number, but he also didn't pick up. Desperate, I finally called the hospital's number. A receptionist answered, and I inquired about my father-in-law, struggling to stay calm. He is currently hospitalized. I can't provide more details over the phone, so could you please come here? After being transferred through several departments, I received this information and froze. I responded that I would come immediately, hurriedly started the car again, and drove off. The traffic on the road seemed to reflect my anxiety. My father-in-law had been fine before I left, seeing me off as usual. Why had he suddenly been hospitalized? I deeply regretted leaving him alone. Arriving at the hospital, I followed the receptionist's directions to his room. Walking down the tense hallway, I quietly opened the door to find my husband already there. We exchanged surprised glances. He explained that he couldn't answer the phone because he had been waiting for my father-in-law's test results. I, too, had been unavailable while driving.
I'm sorry, I couldn't answer your call.
It's fine. How is your father? Prompted by him, I looked at my father-in-law lying in bed. Though he looked slightly pale, his breathing seemed steady.
He's okay. There's no serious issue. He's just here for some tests. Actually,
Hearing from my husband that my father-in-law wasn't in danger finally allowed me to breathe a sigh of relief. But why had he been hospitalized? Just as I was about to learn the reason from my husband, the door to the hospital room burst open with a bang. My sister-in-law rushed in, her eyes filled with fear. Ignoring us, she ran straight to my father-in-law's bed and screamed upon seeing him. "Ah! What happened to Dad?" Her loud scream made my husband hastily try to calm her down. But her panicked voice echoed through the room.
please, calm down.
He tried to pull her away from the bed. Though her voice eventually softened, she suddenly glared at me and started yelling. "You were with him. What happened?" Her angry words hit me, and I was left speechless. My husband tried to intervene and calm her, but her anger was still directed at me. Amidst the confusion, I felt a strange sense of unease. While my father-in-law needed oxygen therapy, such a sudden hospitalization seemed unlikely.
Please, let's calmly discuss this.
My husband turned to us, speaking quietly as he explained what he knew. It seemed my father-in-law's oxygen device had lost power. After I left, he had been resting in his room when the device powered off. He woke up struggling to breathe, tried to turn the device back on but it wouldn't work, and couldn't reach either my husband or me. He managed to connect his portable tank and catch his breath, but grew anxious about our return. Feeling a headache coming on, he decided to go to the hospital but had no means of transportation. He tried calling a taxi but found his hands shaking too much to dial. So he went to the neighbor's house for help. The neighbor, seeing him, screamed and took him inside, laid him on their living room couch, cooled him with ice packs, and called an ambulance. Only then did my father-in-law realize he was suffering from heat stroke. Thanks to the timely treatment at the hospital, he was now stable. According to the doctor, my father-in-law's age made him less sensitive to heat, and he mistook his symptoms for aging issues. With convulsions setting in, immediate treatment and a few days of observation were deemed necessary. After hearing this, I asked my husband a pressing question. The device losing power. It couldn't have been the plug. We installed it so it couldn't be easily unplugged, right? My husband frowned, looking thoughtful. My sister-in-law remained silent, but her face was visibly pale.
You're right. It shouldn't have unplugged on its own. I checked when I went home to pack for the hospital. The plug was still in.
What? Then why? His words only deepened my confusion. He had gone home to prepare the hospital bag and checked the device, finding the power off but the plug still in. He now looked at my sister-in-law with a stern expression. Her face, as pale as a ghost, suggested she was hiding something. Before I could comprehend why my husband seemed so angry, he raised his voice at her.
You turned off the breaker, didn't you? Say something.
His voice echoed through the room, making her jump and start trembling. She opened her mouth to speak but seemed unable to form words. Then my husband pulled something from his pocket. The hospital had called us multiple times, but my husband had been the first to answer. When he went home to pack, he immediately noticed something wrong. The house was unusually hot, and none of the electrical appliances were working. Checking the breaker, he found it switched off. Puzzled, he recalled our home security cameras. We had installed several cameras years ago after a break-in, and they had remained for our safety. Despite our efforts to save electricity, these were deemed necessary.
I found this on the cameras. I transferred it to my phone to show you both.
My husband showed us the footage on his smartphone. First, what appeared was the familiar entrance to our home. A few minutes after I had left, my sister-in-law showed up. I was surprised to see that she had come to our house, and I couldn't help but glance at her sitting next to me. She used her own key to unlock the door and went inside. Unlike her usual loud self, she was moving around cautiously, almost as if she was checking to make sure no one was around. It looked like she was confirming my absence. My husband operated the smartphone, switching to the camera inside the entrance. The location of our breaker is near the ceiling of the shoe cabinet. My sister-in-law climbed onto the chair we used to put on shoes and opened the breaker cover. What is she doing? Even though I knew what was going to happen, I couldn't help but scream. The camera, which has an audio recording function triggered by sound, captured not only the rustling noises but also her horrifying mutterings. This is the breaker, right? If the fridge stops, that savings freak will calm down a bit, right? Her malicious laughter echoed in the silent hospital room. Here you go. Enjoy your favorite energy saving. After that, the video ended because the breaker was tripped. We were left speechless and stood there in shock. When the breaker is tripped, the power supply to the entire house stops. For the few hours until my husband noticed, as she had planned, the contents of the refrigerator would have turned into a disaster. From her panic when she rushed into the hospital room, she clearly hadn't understood the gravity of her actions, but this was far too malicious to be considered just a punishment for me. However, she reacted in an unexpected way. Because you're always nagging about saving energy. Tears welling up, she started raising her voice to justify herself. I didn't know father was home. I thought he had gone out with you. It's your fault for leaving him alone. She kept repeating that she didn't expect this to happen. Her tearful plea for self-preservation was in stark contrast to the fiery anger burning within me. How could you sneak in and cut the power like a thief? We're lucky he survived, but what if something had happened to your father? I couldn't help but lash out at her, but she raised her voice even louder to blame me. It's your fault. It's all your fault that father ended up like this. Her accusations pierced my heart. True, I shouldn't have left him alone. Wasn't it my mistake to leave him behind, saying it would be a burden to take him out? In the tense hospital room, suddenly, the atmosphere was shattered.
Be quiet.
The father-in-law, who should have been asleep, shouted at her. He couldn't speak very loudly due to his illness. Given his usually calm demeanor, we were all taken aback. Our gazes all turned to my sister-in-law.
Do you understand what you've done? You caused trouble for everyone, and nearly killed your own father. Luna is not to blame.
His eyes were filled with anger and disappointment. His voice was much harsher than his usual gentle tone. The commotion caused by my sister-in-law's screaming had fully awakened him, and he had heard the entire conversation, including the surveillance camera incident.
If you keep this up, get out. And don't ever come back.
His sharp reprimand left my sister-in-law pale and frozen, but soon she started to cry loudly. It was incredibly annoying. She was apologizing to her father, but he responded,
You're a nuisance. Get out.
With that, my husband escorted her out of the hospital room. A few days later, my father-in-law was discharged. When my husband and I went to pick him up, he greeted us with a relieved smile, his health having improved. But upon returning home, my sister-in-law was waiting in front of the entrance. Since that incident, she hadn't shown herself to us. We had expected her to apologize, but the words that came out of her mouth were the same as before. It's your fault. Everything that happened to my father is because of you. Both my father-in-law and husband looked exasperated. Seeing her once again trying to blame me, my father-in-law stepped forward.
You should be grateful we didn't call the police. What you did is unforgivable.
His cold voice left her speechless. But he didn't stop there. He was utterly disgusted with her.
You're disowned. It's unbelievable that you still don't understand the seriousness of this situation. As I said at the hospital, don't ever come to our house again.
With a stern tone, he dismissed her and entered the house. She stood there in shock, unable to move, probably never expecting to be disowned by her own father. My husband and I believed his anger was justified, and we decided to continue supporting him. We left her standing there and went back inside. After that, my sister-in-law tried to contact us multiple times to apologize. But my father-in-law ignored all of them. He had no sympathy for her after all the trouble she had caused. Neither did we. My father-in-law refused to support her financially for her wedding or honeymoon and declared he wouldn't attend the wedding. Incidentally, I was once ambushed by her outside our house. She pleaded with me tearfully to persuade my father-in-law, but I had already decided not to forgive her. I listened to her entire apology and then left. Eventually, her fiancé found out about everything. He had initially contacted my father-in-law out of curiosity about the odd refusal to attend the wedding. When he learned that my sister-in-law had caused the emergency hospitalization by cutting the power, he turned pale and apologized to my father-in-law. Unlike her, he was a sensible person. He said, what she did is attempted murder, and ended their engagement. They hadn't moved into their new place yet, so that was cancelled too. My sister-in-law had already quit her job, claiming it was for the marriage. She had spent most of her savings on spa and beauty treatments in preparation for the wedding, so she was nearly broke. They had already sent out the invitations, so she had to bear half of the cancellation fee. She ended up struggling with debt due to her own actions, but she finally understood she couldn't show her face to us anymore. Meanwhile, the three of us lived peacefully. Without her chaotic presence, my father-in-law's condition improved. Considering his age, we couldn't be complacent, but for now, we didn't have to think about moving him to a care facility. We are even planning a trip. How was this story? Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel. See you in the next video.